Hi, my name is Dan Grolowski. I'm an economist at the University of Baltimore, and I've put together a series of slides to help you better understand what happens when the government intervenes in a marketplace. This corresponds to Chapter 7 of our text, and the idea here is to not replace the text with this slideshow, but the idea here is to create something that can be used to help you learn. Well, we are continuing with our introduction or presentation material for Chapter 7. Again, Chapter 7, what is it all about? It's about government intervention in marketplaces. There's always a purpose to government intervention. Sometimes the government intervenes to help a particular group, either producers or consumers. Sometimes a government intervenes to encourage production or consumption of a good or service. And sometimes the government intervention is simply to raise revenues. We want to look at all government interventions, but time limits us, and we can really only look at a few of them. We have to keep in mind that government intervention is done, of course, by the government. In the United States, that's the group that has the power, really, to intervene in markets, at least legally. And the government acts to promote the well-being of all citizens. Within that framework, however, there are implications for the government intervention in markets. To examine those implications, we have to revisit some of our old friends, producer and consumer surplus, and we will take that approach. In a more detailed sense, what exactly are we going to do? We're going to take the supply and demand model, and we're going to use it first to look at taxes. What happens when the government taxes a particular good or a particular service? We need to keep in mind that the price elasticity of demand plays a very important role when determining the impact of sales taxes in markets. We also are going to look at what happens when we put a price floor in a market. What is a price floor? A price floor means the government has decided that prices will not fall below a certain level. And we need to think, what markets are there price floors in? Well, there's a very important labor market in the United States, and that is the market for minimum wage labor. We want to think about what does supply and demand tell us because of the imposition of the minimum wage. Again, our approach will take a fairly deep dive using the demand and supply model. We will draw upon, of course, the material from Chapter 7 of your text. You may see pieces of Chapter 6 in here. It's not necessary to go back and master the entire Chapter 6, but that is where you will find additional supporting material concerning the imposition of price changes, and in particular, what happens with producer and consumer surplus. We will take a deep dive, so to speak, with demand and supply and producer and consumer surplus, and we'll follow that deep dive with what is presented in the text about the minimum wage, and also what is presented in the text about taxes. We need to keep in mind always that we're dealing from a positive economic perspective. That means we are concerned with what is, not in a normative sense being concerned with what should be. That's a big difference. Potentially, some of the items surrounding the minimum wage will cause you a little bit of anger, maybe cause you to get a little bit agitated, and that's a good thing. We need to take that positive economic approach so we can better understand what happens in markets when a minimum wage is imposed.